The UES Prometheus shook like a leaf in a storm as Captain Jinwoo Kim gripped his command chair. For 30 long years, humanity had thrown ship after ship at the invisible wall that surrounded their galaxy. Every attempt had failed. Every crew had turned back broken and defeated. But not today, we did it, Jinwoo whispered, barely believing his own words. 200 of Earth's best and brightest were now floating in space that no human had ever seen before. They had finally broken through, but something was wrong, very wrong. "Captain, you need to see this," Science Officer Minji Park called out, her hands shaking as she worked her controls. The young woman had seen plenty of strange things in space, but nothing like this. "These energy readings, they're impossible. Everything we know about physics says this can't exist." The numbers on her screen kept changing, jumping between values that made no sense. Energy levels that should have torn their ship apart were somehow keeping them perfectly safe. It was like the universe itself was playing by different rules out here. Navigator Sung-Ho Lee looked up from his station, his face pale as moonlight. "Captain, I need to tell you something important. This barrier we just crossed, it's not natural. Someone made this thing. Someone built a wall around our entire galaxy." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared at Sung-Ho. A wall around the galaxy. Who could build something that massive? And more importantly, why? "Are you absolutely certain?" Jinwoo asked, though he could already see the answer in his navigator's frightened eyes. "The energy patterns are too perfect, too organized. This is technology, Captain. Ancient technology, but technology all the same. Someone wanted to keep us inside our galaxy, and they built this barrier to make sure we stayed put." Communications Officer Yuna Choi suddenly gasped and grabbed her head. "Captain, I'm picking up transmissions, but they're not coming through. Our radio equipment, they're in my head." Other crew members began to notice it too. Strange voices that weren't voices, speaking in languages that didn't use words. Images began flooding their minds, geometric shapes that hurt to look at, patterns that seemed to twist and bend in ways that made their eyes water. "Everyone, stay calm," Jinwoo ordered, but he could feel it too. Something was pressing against his thoughts, trying to show him things he didn't want to see. "Medical team to the bridge now." Dr. Hyunwoo Bae arrived within minutes, scanning crew members with his medical equipment. "Captain, their brain activity is off the charts. Something is directly interfacing with their neural pathways. It's like someone is broadcasting directly into their minds." The nightmares started that night. Every crew member experienced the same visions, vast structures floating in empty space, built by beings that looked nothing like any life form they'd ever imagined. The shapes in their dreams defied description, existing in dimensions that human minds weren't designed to understand. Jinwoo found himself walking the corridors at night, unable to sleep like the rest of his crew. He passed by other insomniacs, all of them staring out the windows at the strange space beyond their galaxy. The stars looked different here. They pulsed with colors that had no names, and sometimes they seemed to move in patterns that suggested intelligence. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" asked Chief Engineer Woo Jin Lim, joining his captain at one of the observation decks. "The crew is scared, Captain. Hell, I'm scared. We came out here looking for new worlds to explore, but instead we found this." Jinwoo nodded, understanding his officer's fear because he felt it too. "We knew this mission was dangerous when we volunteered, but we're humans, Woo Jin. We don't run from the unknown, we face it head-on." But even as he said the words, Jinwoo wondered if humanity had finally found something they weren't ready to face. The barrier had kept them safe inside their galaxy for millions of years. Now that they had broken through, what would they find, waiting for them in the darkness beyond? The shared nightmares continued night after night. Crew members began reporting the same recurring dream, ancient guardians watching from the void, waiting for something to happen, waiting for them to discover the truth about why the barrier existed in the first place. Whatever that truth was, Jinwoo knew it would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. The first thing that struck Captain Jinwoo was the sheer size of what lay ahead. Floating in the endless black of space beyond their galaxy were structures so massive they made Earth's moon look like a pebble. These weren't natural formations. They were built, crafted by intelligence far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "My God," whispered engineer Taehyun Shin as he ran his scanners over the nearest construct. "Captain, these things are ancient. I'm talking millions of years old, maybe more. But they're still active, still working. The structures were unlike anything in human experience. They seemed to shift and flow, even while remaining perfectly still, their surfaces covered in symbols that made the crew's eyes hurt when they tried to focus on them. Some crew members reported headaches just from looking at the readouts on their screens. "The symbols keep moving," reported visual analysis specialist Ji-hye Moon, rubbing her temples. "Every time I think I'm starting to understand one, it changes into something else. It's like they're alive." Jinwoo ordered the ship to maintain a safe distance while they studied these mysterious guardians. Days passed as the crew worked around the clock, trying to understand what they were looking at. The structures, which they began calling sentinels, showed no signs of noticing the tiny human ship nearby. It was Communications Officer Yoona Choi who finally made the breakthrough. "Captain, I'm detecting very faint energy signatures from the nearest sentinel. It's weak, like a battery running down after millions of years. So I think it's dying." "Can you establish communication?" Jinwoo asked. "I can try, but it might be dangerous. These signals aren't like anything we've ever dealt with. They seem to connect directly to the brain, rather than going through our normal senses." After hours of careful work, Yoona managed to create a connection. The moment the link established, everyone on the bridge felt it. A presence older than human civilization, touching their minds with exhausted gentleness. The Phi. Dying Sentinel's first message was simple. "You should not be here, young ones." Medical Officer So-young Kang volunteered to be the primary interface with the alien intelligence. As a doctor, she was trained to handle stress and trauma, but nothing could have prepared her for what the Sentinel was about to reveal. The connection deepened, and suddenly So-young's mind was flooded with images, knowledge, and terrible truth. She saw the galaxy as it really was, not a home, but a prison. She saw every species she'd ever heard of, including humanity, and learned they were all connected by one horrifying fact. "We're prisoners," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as the revelation hit her. "All of us. Every species in the galaxy. We're the descendants of exiles." The bridge fell silent except for So-young's quiet sobs. Through the neural link, the rest of the crew began to feel echoes of what she was experiencing. The Sentinel, using the last of its ancient power, shared the forbidden history that had been hidden for millions of years. Long ago, their ancestors had been part of a vast intergalactic civilization that spanned countless galaxies. But they had committed a crime so terrible that they were cast out, banished to this single galaxy and locked away from the rest of the universe. "What did they do?" Jinwoo asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. The images that came next were almost too much for human minds to process. Their ancestors had discovered how to weaponize dark matter itself, the invisible substance that held the universe together. In their arrogance and hunger for power, they had turned it into weapons of unimaginable destruction. The war that followed nearly tore reality apart. Entire sectors of space were ripped into nothingness. Billions of innocent civilizations were caught in the crossfire as the dark matter weapons spread chaos across multiple galaxies. "They almost destroyed everything," So-young gasped, her voice barely audible. "The whole universe almost came apart because of what our ancestors did." The other intergalactic civilizations had no choice. They gathered their combined might and banished the war criminals and their descendants to the Milky Way galaxy, then built the barrier to contain them. The Sentinels were posted as eternal guards, making sure the dangerous knowledge and technologies stayed locked away. "The Milky Way isn't our home," So-young continued, the alien knowledge still flowing through her mind. "It's our cage. We've been prisoners for millions of years, and we never even knew it." The crew stared at each other in shocked silence. Everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe was a lie. They weren't explorers discovering new frontiers. They were the descendants of the universe's greatest criminals, forever cut off from the rest of creation. The dying Sentinel's final message burned itself into their memories. "The barriers grow. Weak, Soon the judges will return to see if you have learned. Pray that you have changed since your exile began. The truth was eating the crew alive from the inside out. Security Chief Dong-hyun Park had dealt with plenty of difficult situations during his military career, but nothing had prepared him for this. Grown men and women, some of the best minds humanity had to offer, were breaking down in the corridors of their own ship. "Captain, we've got another incident in Section C," Dong-hyun reported, exhaustion clear in his voice. "Engineer Min Seok threw a wrench at the wall and started screaming about how everything we've built is worthless. It took 3 people to calm him down." The holographic records from the dying Sentinel played continuously in the ship's main conference room. Anyone could watch them, and many did, over and over again. The images showed civilizations being ripped from their homes, entire species loaded onto massive transport ships like cattle being moved to slaughter. Men, women, and children who looked remarkably similar to humans, all crying as they were forced into exile. "Look at their faces," whispered navigation specialist Kyung-min Ahn, staring at the recordings for the 10th time. They knew they'd never see their real homes again, just like us. We're not explorers, we're just prisoners who don't know we're in jail. The worst part was watching their ancestors' crimes unfold in perfect, horrible detail. The dark matter weapons didn't just destroy planets, they unraveled the very fabric of space itself. Entire solar systems simply vanished, leaving behind wounds in reality that took millions of years to heal. Pilot Hyejin Nam had barely left the conference room in 3 days. She studied every frame, every detail, taking notes and making calculations. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair a mess, but her eyes burned with desperate determination. "We can't let this define us," she said to anyone who would listen. "Yes, our ancestors made terrible mistakes, but we're different. We've evolved. We've grown beyond violence and war." She had started keeping a detailed log of every positive thing humanity had ever accomplished. Medical breakthroughs that saved millions of lives, art that captured the beauty of the human spirit, acts of selfless heroism that proved humans could be better than their worst impulses. "Look at this," she insisted, showing her research to Medical Officer So-young Kang. "We abolished slavery. We created international laws to protect civilians. In war, we've spent decades trying to clean up our planet's environment. That has to count for something, right?" But not everyone shared her optimism. Weapons Officer Ji Hoon-yu had drawn his own conclusions from the historical records, and they were far darker. "This is insane," he argued, during what had become daily heated discussions in the mess hall. "We're talking about crimes committed millions of years ago by people who aren't even the same species as us anymore. Evolution has changed us completely since then. Why should we pay for what they did?" Ji-hoon had gathered his own group of supporters, mostly from the military and security sections of the crew. They agreed that the whole situation was unfair from the start. "Think about it logically," he continued, his voice getting louder with each word. "We've been prisoners our entire existence, and we never even knew it. Every limitation we've faced, every barrier that kept us from exploring beyond our galaxy, it was all artificial. Someone else decided our fate before we were even born." His followers nodded in agreement. Chief Security Analyst Young-ho Cheon spoke up. "The barriers are failing anyway. The Sentinels are dying. Maybe this is our chance to finally break free and claim what should have been ours all along." Captain Jinwoo found himself walking between these two groups, like a man crossing a minefield. Half his crew wanted to prove humanity deserved redemption, while the other half wanted to reject the entire system that had imprisoned them. "Captain, we need to make a decision," urged Science Officer Minji Park during one of their private meetings. "The crew is falling apart. Some people are talking about sabotaging the remaining Sentinels. Others want to send messages back to Earth, begging for forgiveness for crimes we didn't commit. We can't keep going like this." The psychological pressure was immense. Crew members who had been friends for years were now avoiding each other. Arguments broke out over meals. Some people stopped eating altogether, while others couldn't sleep because of nightmares about their ancestors' crimes. "I keep thinking about my daughter back on Earth," confided Communications Officer Yuna Choi. "She's only 7 years old. What kind of future are we leaving for her? Will she grow up knowing she's the descendant of universe destroyers, or will she never know the truth and live a lie like we did?" The weight of decision was crushing Captain Jinwoo. Whatever choice he made would affect not just his crew, but potentially all of humanity. If they returned to Earth with this knowledge, it could destroy human civilization from within. If they stayed silent, they'd be living with the most important secret in human history. But time was running out. The Sentinels were failing, and somewhere beyond the galactic barrier, ancient judges were preparing to return and decide humanity's fate. The numbers on Chief Technical Officer Yoonji Hong's screen were terrifying in their simplicity. She had run the calculations dozens of times, hoping for a different result, but the math was brutal and unforgiving. "Captain, I wish I had better news," she said, her voice shaking as she presented her findings to the senior staff. "The Sentinel network is breaking down faster than we thought. Based on the power degradation rates I'm seeing, we have maybe 30 years before total system failure. Maybe less." The conference room fell silent. 30 years sounded like a long time, but in cosmic terms, it was barely a heartbeat. Within the lifetime of their children, possibly within their own lifetimes, the barriers would come down completely. "What happens then?" asked Navigator Sung-Ho Lee, though everyone already knew the answer. "The judges return," Yoonji replied simply, "and they decide whether humanity lives or dies." Diplomatic attaché Minho Song slammed his hand on the table. "We have to warn Earth immediately. Every government, every leader, every person on the planet needs to know what's coming. Humanity deserves the chance to prepare." "Prepare how?" Captain Jinwoo shot back. "What exactly do you think Earth can do in 30 years that will matter to beings who can build barriers around entire galaxies?" Minho stood up, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "I don't know, but we have to try something. Maybe we can develop new technologies, prove we've moved beyond our ancestors' mistakes. Maybe we can show them our art, our music, our capacity for love and compassion. Or maybe," Jinwoo said quietly, "we'll cause a panic that destroys civilization before the judges even arrive. Imagine what happens when 8 billion people learn they're prisoners, waiting for execution. Wars, riots, the complete breakdown of society. Is that the humanity you want the judges to find?" The debate had been raging for weeks now. Every senior officer had an opinion, and none of them were simple answers. Some wanted to return to Earth immediately with the news. Others believed secrecy was humanity's only hope of survival. Medical Officer So-Young Kang, who had never fully recovered from her first contact with the Sentinel, offered a different perspective. "Maybe the truth doesn't matter as much as what we do with the time we have left. Whether Earth knows or not, we need to become the kind of species that deserves to survive." But the crew was splitting into more dangerous factions. Weapons Officer Ji-hoon Yu had stopped attending official meetings altogether. Instead, he gathered his supporters in unused storage areas and maintenance shafts, speaking in whispers about taking direct action. "The barriers are failing anyway," he argued to anyone who would listen. "Why wait for permission from judges who imprisoned us for crimes we didn't commit? We should accelerate the process, destroy the remaining Sentinels ourselves, and show the universe that humanity bows to no one." His group had grown larger each week. Security personnel, engineers, even some of the scientists were attracted to his message of defiance. They were tired of feeling helpless, tired of being judged for actions taken by ancestors they'd never known existed. Chief Security Analyst Young-Ho Cheon had become Ji-hoon's right-hand man. "We have the technical knowledge now," he whispered during one of their secret meetings. "We know how the Sentinels work, a few well-placed explosives, some targeted energy, disruptions, and we could bring down this whole prison system." On the other side, pilot Hyejin Nam was leading an equally desperate effort to prove humanity's worth. She had organized teams to catalogue every positive achievement in human history, every act of kindness, every breakthrough that had made life better for others. "We need to build a case," she insisted, working 18-hour days alongside volunteers from across the ship. "When the judges arrive, we'll show them documentation of human charity organizations, our efforts to protect endangered species, our attempts to help other worlds we've discovered." Her team had created massive databases of human achievement, stories of individuals who had sacrificed everything to help strangers, scientists who had dedicated their lives to curing diseases, artists who had captured the beauty of existence itself. But even Hyejin's optimism was cracking under the pressure. "What if it's not enough?" she confided to Captain Jinwoo during one of their late-night conversations. "What if we're fooling ourselves? What if no amount of good deeds can make up for what our ancestors did?" The psychological strain was affecting everyone. Crew members who had once been close friends now avoided each other in the corridors. Meals were eaten in tense silence. Some people had stopped sleeping, afraid of nightmares about the coming judgment. "We're tearing ourselves apart," observed Chief Engineer Woo Jin Lim. "If this continues, we won't need judges to destroy us. We'll do it ourselves." Captain Jinwoo spent his night staring out at the dying sentinels, wrestling with an impossible decision. Every choice seemed to lead to disaster. Warn Earth and risk panic that could doom the species. Stay silent and let humanity face judgment, unprepared. Support Jihoon's rebellion and risk proving they were still as violent as their ancestors. Back Hyejin's redemption effort and possibly waste precious time on a hopeless cause. The weight of billions of lives rested on his shoulders, and time was running out with each passing day. They came without warning, appearing in space like stars being born in fast forward. The judges weren't ships or structures. They were beings of pure light and energy, existing in dimensions that made human eyes water when they tried to focus on them. Captain Jinwoo felt their presence before he saw them, a weight in his mind that spoke of age beyond human comprehension. "Captain," whispered Science Officer Minji Park, her instruments going wild as she tried to record what was happening. "I'm detecting energy patterns that shouldn't be possible. These beings, they exist in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously." The entire crew of the Prometheus had gathered on the bridge, knowing this moment would determine not just their fate, but the future of every human who had ever lived. Some were praying, others stood in stunned silence, but all of them understood they were witnessing something that would be remembered until the end of time. The lead judge spoke without words, its communication flowing directly into their minds, like warm water. "Children of the exiled ones, why have you come beyond the barriers that were set for your protection and ours?" Captain Jinwoo stepped forward, feeling the weight of his crew's hopes pressing down on his shoulders. Behind him, he could sense the 2 factions that had torn his ship apart, Jihoon's rebels ready to fight, and Hyejin's redemption seekers prepared to beg for mercy. But in this moment, facing beings older than his entire planet, Jinwoo realized both approaches were wrong. "We came seeking the truth," he said simply, "and now that we know it, we want to make things right." The judges shifted, their energy forms pulsing with colors that had no names in human language. Jinwoo could feel their surprise, though he didn't understand why yet. "Your ancestors nearly destroyed the universe itself," another judge communicated. "They weaponized the very forces that hold reality together. Do you comprehend the magnitude of their crimes?" "We do," Jinwoo replied, thinking of all the recordings they had watched, all the destruction their ancestors had caused. "But we also understand something else. We've had millions of years to grow, to learn, to become better than what we were." Weapons Officer Jihoon pushed forward, his face red with anger. "We shouldn't have to answer for crimes we didn't commit. You imprisoned an entire galaxy for the actions of a few. And you," the lead judge turned its attention to Jihoon. "Would you repeat their mistakes given the chance?" "I would fight for my people's freedom," Jihoon shot back. "As they did," the judge replied simply. "Violence in pursuit of what you believe is rightfully yours. How are you different from your ancestors?" Pilot Hyejin Nam stepped up next, holding a datapad filled with humanity's greatest achievements. "Please, we've prepared evidence of how much we've changed. Our art, our science, our compassion for other species. We're not the same people who were exiled millions of years ago. You offer proof of your worth like defendants in a trial," observed a third judge, "seeking to earn your freedom through good behavior. Yet still you think in terms of imprisonment and release." Captain Jinwoo felt the conversation slipping away from both his officers. This wasn't going the way anyone had expected. The judges weren't interested in humanity's crimes or achievements. They were looking for something else entirely. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "We want to know what you have learned," the lead judge replied. "Not what you have done, but what you have become." In that moment, Jinwoo understood. This wasn't a trial or a test of strength. It was something far more fundamental. He thought about his crew, torn apart by impossible choices. He thought about Earth, full of people who didn't even know they were prisoners. He thought about the dying sentinels, guardians who had watched over the galaxy for millions of years without thanks or recognition. We've learned that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in breaking free from constraints, Jinwoo said slowly. It's in choosing to serve something greater than yourself. The judge's energy forms pulsed brighter. Explain. Let us become the guardians, Jinwoo said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside him. Let humanity protect the galaxy from the mistakes our ancestors made. We know the dangers better than anyone because we carry that legacy in our genes. Who better to watch for the signs, to prevent it from happening again? The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Even the ship's engines seemed to quiet as the judges considered this unprecedented offer. Science Officer Minji worked frantically to record everything, knowing that whatever happened next would reshape human history. How you would willingly become wardens of your own prison? The lead judge finally asked. We would become shepherds of our home, Jinwoo replied. The judges conferred in languages that existed beyond sound, their energy forms dancing around each other in patterns that hurt to watch, but were somehow beautiful. When they finally reached their decision, the lead judge's communication carried something that might have been approval. The sentinels are dying. The barriers they maintained are failing. If you truly wish to serve as guardians, you will need to replace them. You will need to learn technologies beyond your current understanding. You will need to sacrifice your dreams of exploring beyond this galaxy to protect those within it. We accept, Jinwoo said without hesitation. The Prometheus returned to Earth 6 months later, but not as the explorers who had left. They carried with them new knowledge, new purpose, and new responsibilities that would define humanity for generations to come. The crew that had once been split by impossible choices was now united by a mission greater than any of them had imagined. They were no longer prisoners waiting for judgment. They were the galaxy's new guardians, chosen not despite their ancestors' crimes, but because of them.